ever. Hey, look at that. We got picture and everything. All right. We finally got it going on. All right. Good. All right, we're good. The bars on the mic. The bars are. Looks like they're okay.
You got two, okay.
Yeah, looks like it's fine. From what I can tell. All right. Here we go. All right, good morning, everybody. How are we doing? Okay? No? What, we don't like cold? Oh, that's right. You're the grumpy one. I forgot. All right. So, welcome to class. It's not as cold in here as it is outside. Thank goodness for that. I know you guys were thinking, wait a minute, I'm going to school in Florida. What's up with cold? It does actually get cold here. There's a couple of weeks where it's downright chilly, but for the most part, not so much. So when the rest of America is frozen solid, we're going to be all right. If it makes you feel any better. Yes.
Considering that the weather's been like seemingly dropping more and more over the course of 40 years, I can see why it's been.
Yep. No, there's definitely some merit in being in Florida. In fact, I remember seeing a cartoon one time in the paper that was talking about the temperatures all across the United States, and it said the rest of the place is just an ice block, and then Florida, there's a little sun in there, and the rest of America was like, to heck with you, Florida. They used a different phrase there, but point being, at least we have the better of the cold, so we have less of it than everybody else. So hooray for that. But today is a big day because we are going to be talking about what I call the big three tools. We are going to be delving into the tools of modeling. We're going to be touching on the multi-cut tool, the insert edge loop tool, and the extrude tool. And these are the tools you must learn how to use in order to model in Maya. And what's great about today is once we know how to model, we've got these tools down, you could literally finish the class if you had to from that point. You know how to model. It's just working out how to make the individual details you're trying to create. So once we've had today, what I would recommend you do is start working on your week 1 turn-in, your competency. And as soon as you finish your week 1 competency, start working on your week 2. Don't wait for classes and information and all that. If you want to watch the lectures in advance, please do so. I always recommend that. But get to work as soon as you can. That is always the best policy. The reason being, the work will pile up on you very quickly. So you don't want to sort of wait until, the assignment's due, in 2 days, or it's due in a day, or it's due tonight. That's like the worst time ever to start working on this stuff. Literally, the sooner you can get to it, the better. And I recommend very highly, at least 4 days in advance trying to get stuff done, because there is so much of it to do. And I don't know if you've noticed, but when you have your technical problems, it's always at the last minute. Have you noticed that? Like, you don't have technical issues all month long, and then the minute something has to happen and there's a critical deadline, that's when something goes horribly amok. So if you start sooner, the horribly amuckness happens sooner, and then you have the opportunity to overcome that. You can get some help and get things straightened out and working just fine. Does that make sense? Get a hell yeah on that? Okay, so again, waiting to the last minute is kind of fun and exciting for some people, but I don't recommend it, because what ends up happening is that's when all the worst stuff happens. So try to get that stuff done in advance. It's going to make a big difference, I promise you, on that one. All righty, so let's get into some materials for today. Again, we're going to get into the big three, but first, we're going to learn some new vocabulary stuff. If we're going to be modeling, we need to understand some of the philosophies of modeling and how we go about modeling. One of the most critical ones is the idea of modeling in parts. We are going to build objects in parts. And again, our goal is to make things as realistic as possible. Here we're going for realism, like a still life. So we need to model objects the way they really are in the real world. And as a result, objects in the real world are made of several pieces. So we need to make sure we're making them out of several pieces as well. And not just, oh, this object is made in pieces, it's made in 2 or 3, but the correct number of pieces. And again, the mantra for the modeler is build it like it's built. And what that means is, if I had to build this actual object, how many pieces would I have to make it out of? And then that's how many you're gonna model it out of as well. So we have these criteria to help you figure out, well, how many pieces do I need to make an object out of? And that's gonna help you out with that tremendously. But again, the idea is, in the real world, things are made of parts, so we wanna make things out of parts as well. Does that make sense? Building in parts, specifically the correct number of parts. All right, so let's take a look at our first criteria when it comes to determining the correct number of pieces to make an object out of, and that is different materials. So when it comes to different materials, anytime you see a separate, new, or different material, that needs to be another part or another piece of that particular object. So, for example, if I take a look at this fast food dinette set here, who can list for me one material that they see? Yeah, wood, absolutely, or wood-ish, or whatever this stuff is here, this material, probably particle board or something like that, but it is wood material, so that's going to be one piece. Metal, absolutely. If you take a look at this thing, we've got these little metal feet down here at the bottom, and those things screw into the bottom so that you can balance them out without having to put like matches or napkins underneath there to get it to balance properly. So those little metal feet that screw up and down, that's another part. So now we're looking at least 2 pieces. Plastic, absolutely. There's this plastic material here that runs around the border of the wood so that we don't get like splinters and little pinches and stuff like that. So that's another material that we're gonna have to make this thing out of. What else? Anything else? Yes, someone did say metal. We talked about the feet, but these things as well, or the screws also. Hey, do screws, is that part? Heck yeah, that's part of it. So that's gonna be something we have to build. If there are cushions, absolutely. If there were cushions, because some of those have like a sort of a slightly spongy material attached to the seat, and different restaurants, different styles. Those are harder to clean, so the more higher end stuff will have that. But point being, if you see a different material, that's going to have to be a separate part. Does that make sense? Hell yeah. You guys are so cold today, you're not even talking. All right. So again, number 1 criteria, how many pieces do I make something out of? Look for materials. That's your first criteria. Second criteria along the lines of build it like it's built, build it the way the real object is built, is if the object is pieced together, then you should model it in pieces that go together. So if things are glued together, if they are nailed together, or if there's some kind of dovetail design or something like that that makes these pieces wedge and fit, if it is a separate piece, you need to build it as a separate piece.
I was just kind of curious about this because I looked ahead into this.
Oh, good for you.
So if we can model something that is made of separate pieces in this class, like you mentioned the assets or whatnot, would we want to make sure it's combined so it acts as one object? Or
no, not at all. Specifically, no, not at all. Yes, combine is the devil, but we will talk about that. So for example, if you take a look at this chair back here, if you look at just the back of the chair, you can see it's made of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces. So when we model that chair, just that back, we're going to make it out of 5 pieces also, because those are separate pieces that have to come together. Does that make sense? Hell yeah. I feel like we're in church today. Come on. All right. Yeah, we're all whispering and we're being on our best behavior. My goodness, you guys come hundreds of miles to behave well. All right, so Here we are. Now we're looking at a Nerf gun, right? Nerf gun fires Nerfs. So some parts of an object need to be separate because they move, because I'm going to have to animate these things. So when you take a look at these pieces and you look at the object that you're building, you say, okay, this chamber right here, this is where you load all the darts in. This needs to rotate so that I can load the next dart into place so that I can shoot somebody with it, right? Therefore, that has to be a separate piece. Otherwise, that's not going to be able to move. If you take a look here, this is the cocking mechanism for the gun. That's what loads the spring. So that needs to move. So that's going to have to be a separate piece. Also, this trigger. This is the trigger that releases the spring that fires the dart so I can shoot someone. And again, it's got to be a separate piece because it's got to be able to move. Does that make sense? Hell yeah? Okay, so in terms of criteria, how many pieces should I build this object out of? Because it's not, well, I made it out of 2 pieces. Is that good enough? No, it's the right number of pieces. Does that make sense? There's a critical difference there. So your criteria for how many pieces should I make an object out of, 1, we're looking for materials, right? Different material, different part, because it's going to require different materials, different shaders and textures. So different material, different part. Number 2, put it together the way it's really put together. So if there's separate pieces that have to be brought together to build this thing, you have to build it in separate pieces to build this thing properly. And then number 3, anything that moves, anything that will be animated, those things have to be separate or they are not going to be able to do their job. All good? Yeah, okay. We should probably have like free coffee or something. All right. So let's talk about component manipulation and how we can change the shape of objects. All right. Now, last time we got together, what we did was we moved components and that changed the edge flow of the object. You guys recall that? We went to vertice mode or edge mode or face mode. You could select the components and move them to match the image plane behind in our edge flow activity. Well, now we're going to talk about changing the shape of the object using those same components. All right. Now, in terms of changing the shape, it's as simple as using the tools in the toolbox, the move tool, the rotate tool, the scale tool. And again, the process is very similar. So here we go. We're going to do an activity together. So we want to make sure we do what? Set the project to the activity file folder because we're going to start working on something. Yes. Okay, that's okay. Yeah, you don't even have to ask. If you need to go out of the classroom to get something or what have you, go ahead and go. I understand. If you got to take a phone call, an urgent one, that's totally fine. Just don't take off for a week. All right, so here we go. Let me get Maya up and running here. I'm going to set my project to my activity file folder. And then I'm going to open my shape change activity. That's the one I want. Open my shape change activity. And again, you will see image planes in the perspective view, but we don't really need them there. Where we need them is here and here. So I'm going to go over here to my orthographic view. This is my front view. And who remembers how I like to see the picture behind the geometry? X-ray mode, which is under shading. So I go to shading and I choose X-ray so that I can see through my geometry. And again, I've got this really nice silhouette that I'm trying to match. I've got some geometry in front. So when it comes to making adjustments to my polygon geometry, again, I want to check one view and see if my polygons are occupying the shape and form that I see. And if that's looking good, then I can go to another view. And of course, I have to turn on X-ray in this window as well, because these menus up here across the top are on a window by window basis. So I go to X-ray mode here. And again, if I look and I see, yeah, my geometry is actually matching the shape and form in both of these views, well, then this must be the shape that I'm going for. This is what I want. So that one is actually fine. Let's take a look at the next one. Again, I take a look at my geometry. I'm matching shape and form, looking pretty good. Then I go to my side view, and oh, wait a minute, I've got a change in shape here. Something's different. So this is where I'm going to have to make some kind of adjustment to change the way this thing looks. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go into component mode as we did before. Who remembers how we go to component mode? Right click over the geometry, and I'm going to choose vertex, and I'm going to select a vertex, and just like I did before, I'm going to move it to change the shape of the object. Now, this happened to some of you guys last time we got together. You're like, well, wait a minute, why is there still a vertex there? Why did I duplicate it or something? Is there, what happened there? And if you look at what's going on, you can see I've only selected the vertex in the front. So when I move it, it looks like I've duplicated the vertex, but that's not what happened at all. There's a vertex behind the one I've selected. So I've only moved one of them, and as a result left this one behind, and that's why I end up with this type of appearance. So what you want to make sure you do is what we call a marquee selection, and that's where you drag with the left mouse button and you create a selection area. And this box will select anything that is in that box. So now that I grab the whole thing, I can grab the arrow and move it, and then, oh yeah, that's changing the shape like I want to. And if you look here, you can see since I've grabbed the front and the back, oh, okay, now I'm actually affecting shape change. So then I'm going to do the same thing over here, grab these two and move them in. And then again, when you look here, it looks like it's matching. And then you look here and it looks like it's matching. Well, okay, well then this must be the shape that I'm meant to create. Does that make sense? Again, the key is grabbing both vertices and moving them together. Otherwise, what happens is it looks like you're duplicating vertices. All right. Now, let's take a look at the next polygon issue. So I'm looking at this object, and you can see in terms of my front view and my side view, the object looks identical. So it's most likely cylindrical in shape because it's happening on both sides. So you can see I've got a fair amount of shape change going on here. And what you need to start thinking as a modeler is wherever you have shape change, that means I need to have components. Because if I don't have components at that position, I'm not going to be able to change the shape. So when I'm looking at this, I see shape change, shape change, shape change. So I'm going to need components in those areas. Does that make sense? All right. So it looks like it goes in right here. So you might be thinking, okay, I need to grab these guys and bring them this way and grab these guys and bring them that way, because that's going to help me match what I'm doing. So you grab these guys, and move them this direction, and you grab these guys and move them this direction. And well, it's kind of doing what I want, but I've got this weird shading going on here. And that's Maya's way of telling you something is going amok. Maya's giving you a little bit of a hint. And again, this looks like I'm doing what I need to do. But if I come over here to my my 3D view, my perspective view, I start looking at my geometry and I'm like, oh no, I've done something terrible in here. And that's what Maya was alluding to with sort of this shading stuff. Does that make sense? So here's what I'm going to do. Rather than move those, I'm going to use a different technique. I am going to marquee select my vertices, but I'm going to utilize scale to change the position of the vertices. Now, I know you're looking at that and you're thinking, well, but scale makes things big or small. What do you mean scale? Vertices are the smallest unit in the polygon geometry. There is nothing smaller, and you can't make them bigger or smaller. So if I select several vertices and I use my scale tool, it will actually cause them to move away from each other when I make them big, or towards each other when I make them smaller. Does that make sense? They don't change size. They are the smallest unit. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to select all the vertices with that marquee style selection. And what you'll notice is I've grabbed everybody all the way around, right, with that marquee selection, because selection does not respect geometry. Geometry is not physical. You can select right through the geometry. You can even select things on the other side of an object that you can't even see, because that's a thing. So once I select all those vertices, I come back over here. I use my scale tool. And again, when we scale from X only, they do move towards each other. But you can see that's only on one axis. I'm pinching it like a soda can. So instead of that, what I want to do, because I want them all to move uniformly, I will scale from the middle. And by scaling from the middle cube, it brings them all together evenly. And you can see that is more of what I was looking for. And if you actually watch it in both views, you can see it happens at the same time. Brings them in. So I'm going to do the same thing with the top. I'm going to marquee select the top. Again, I'm going to scale from the middle, but this time I'm going to scale towards larger. And again, this is not going to make my vertices bigger, but what it will do is push them away from each other. And then that allows me to create this shape. I'm moving them away from each other. All right, how's everybody doing? Okay on this? Okay. All right, let's go for something a little harder. Now, we talked about the idea that edges create changes in shape. I need these components. Wherever there's a change in shape, I need components in order to achieve that. But edges also help to hold shape. They help to maintain position and shape. And in this instance, we're going to use it for that. Now, if you look at this shape that we're trying to hit here, you can see it's sort of pointy on the top and then it sort of goes outward. So if I grab these vertices here and move them out, I lose that shape on top, right? That's not happening. If I grab this shape, again, marquee style selection and scale from the middle, this edge here helps to hold this shape on top. This edge here allows for the shape change. Now, you might be thinking, well, what do I even need that edge for? Well, watch what happens when we don't have that edge. All right, I'm going to grab that edge and I'm going to delete it. Now watch what happens when I grab these vertices and scale them. I lose this part up here. So I needed that edge because that's a holding edge. It will help hold that down into place. So by having this edge here, which seemingly isn't doing anything, it actually does a great deal for me in terms of maintaining that shape. And again, when I scale from the middle, you can see it's actually happening in both views simultaneously because I'm scaling from the middle using this scale tool. Does that make sense? How are we doing with that one? Okay? Okay. All right. Well, thank you for playing. There we go. There's somebody. Game on. All right. Let's go to the last one. This one's a little trickier, right? I see shape changes here. I have components to accomplish that. Yay. So in terms of that shape change, marquee select, again, scale from the middle. Leave this one because that's going to be my holding edge. If I change this one, that's going to alter that shape away from the silhouette. Come back in here, grab this row, scale those guys in. All right, that will accomplish it. Now, I was able to do that, but it took me 2 moves to do that. What if I marquee select some vertices and then hold shift, which is add to selection, and marquee select another row of vertices. So I have them both selected at the same time. Now I can scale them towards each other and they get closer, but they got closer to each other on the y-axis as well. Not only did they get nearer to each other on X and Z, but they also got closer to each other in Y. But I could always scale them away from each other in Y as well and push them apart. Now, That was pretty good. That was a little bit faster. But how about this for an idea? What if I grab this row and hold shift and control and add that row, and I'm going to hold down, if you look at your keyboard, you'll see there's a key called control. Hold that one down, and I'm going to manipulate just the y-axis. And the vertices will actually move in on X and Z simultaneously. You can see I can actually work a lot faster when I can kind of see the moves I want to make. Modeling is very similar to chess. If any of you play chess at all? You don't have to be any good at it. I'm not very good at it, but I've played. But the point is, when you can see a couple of moves into the future, you can actually play faster. Does that make sense? You already know what you want to do before you get there. Modeling is very similar. So in terms of making adjustments to size and shape, again, I can scale these things towards each other or away from each other to get some shape change. But a handy little trick is if I hold down that control key and I scale on the y-axis, objects will move towards each other on X and Z simultaneously and evenly while ignoring the axis that I'm manipulating. And that's what that control key is saying. If you hold control and manipulate an axis, you're saying ignore the one I'm actually manipulating and move the other two. The reason that becomes important is because when we are modeling inanimate objects, things, assets from the real world around us, these things are mostly built by people. And in terms of manufacture, a lot of things exhibit symmetry. There's a lot of similarity. There's a lot of evenness to the way things are constructed because it's actually more economically sound to make things that way, simple and the same on all sides. So when we can utilize some of these tools, we can actually build things that way as well. There's a lot less sort of human error by utilizing these little tricks. And it's going to help us in a number of different activities. How'd you guys do with this, by the way? We good? Were you guys able to get this? Holding the control key down? Yes? Okay, just want to make sure. If you're having trouble, let me know. Again, select one, hold control and shift and select the other, and then hold just control and manipulate the y-axis, and it will move in on X and Z simultaneously. This is a trick we're going to use a lot with extruding. So this is why I'm introducing it now, because this is something we're going to go back to. All right? Okay. Boop. Okay. Now, in terms of polygon faces, we have to talk about their size, their shapes, and how they're built, because when it comes to modeling, making it look great, that's a big part of the job. You definitely want to make the object look awesome. That's the goal. But we're not only creating art, but we are creating art using math. So what we have to do is not only create something that's beautiful, but we have to create something that's mathematically sound. Because basically everything that Maya does is math, literally. Maya is a huge calculator. That's all it is. It's very pretty. It makes some awesome stuff, but it's just a calculator. So in terms of its behavior, we have to create math that makes sense. 1 + 1 = 2. 1 + 1 has to equal 2. If we find a way to make 1 + 1 = 3, bad things are going to start happening because we've got bad math in our files. And by bad math in the files, what can happen? Files crash, files get corrupted, applications shut down. Does that make sense? Because it's all math driven. So not only do we create art, but we have to exhibit and show good math through the process of creating this art. Does that make sense? Okay. And I know that's a bit of a foreign concept because typically in the past, you just wanted to make sure it looked good. And as long as it looked good, you were fine. But that's when you're making art for yourself. And that's not when you're making art as part of a production team. It's not art that's going to be used in a project. It's not art that's going to be given to somebody else on that CG production pipeline and put together to create whatever it is you guys are building. Does that make sense? It's a totally different thought process. So not only do we make beautiful work, and that is unfortunately the given, but we have to make mathematically sound work that will help other people do their jobs throughout the production pipeline, because they're counting on us, because we all work together basically. Everyone doing the one thing that they do really well and then handing that off to the next person so they can do their job. Does that make sense? Get a hell yeah on that? Good. All right, so polygon faces come in 3 basic varieties. We have quads, tris, and n-gons, and they all come together to form our polygon mesh. Now, in terms of a quad, what we're talking about, as the name implies, is the faces have 4 sides. So if you look at this face right here, you can see it's got 1, 2, 3, 4 sides. So that's a quad. Make sense? Okay. Now, ideally, what I'd like you to do for this class is have your models, whatever it is you're building, it doesn't make any difference, but your models should be composed of mostly, if not all, 4-sided faces. This is an added level of challenge. Again, it's not do whatever you want, wherever you want, but create mathematically sound geometry. So 4 sides on every face. Again, that's referred to as a quad. Some faces have 3 sides. They're referred to as tris or triangles. 1, 2, 3 sides. That face is a tri or triangle. If you've looked into video games at all, you hear them referring to the meshes as how many tris it's made of, right? And what they're talking about is how many triangles are on that thing. For our class, some triangles are okay. They're all right here and there. I'd like you to try to do everything you can to make them 4-sided. But a few triangles here and there are not a big deal. Dun, dun, dun. And then we have the naughty, evil n-gon. Anything with more than 4 sides is an n-gon. And I know you're looking at that and you're going, wait, it looks like a square. What do you mean it's got more than 4 sides? Au contraire. 1, 2, 3, 4, because there's a vertice right there, 5. So even though it looks like a 4-sided entity, it is a 5-sided entity and therefore an n-gon. Does that make sense? N-gons are never okay. That's not just this class, any class. N-gons are a problem. Now you might be wondering, well, what kind of problem do n-gons cause? Well, this is that trouble, that crashing files, all those problems I was telling you about. Bad math. That's what n-gons can yield. Because what ends up happening, amongst many reasons, is when we create our final images, our renders of our project, what it looks like when we make our final image or our final movie. What Maya does in conjunction with whatever rendering engine we're using is it takes a look at the faces and it takes a 4-sided face and it mathematically triangulates it. It doesn't physically do it, but it mathematically triangulates it to calculate out what that surface looks like and how it reacts towards light. So faces with more than 4 sides, it has to do a lot more math to try to figure out what that looks like. And that's what leads to render crashes. That's what leads to the application crashing. That's what leads to tools not functioning properly, amongst the many issues. And anything that deforms, and what I mean by deform, I mean like changing shape, whether it's organic, like a human being, or organic, like a piece of plastic, it bends and changes shape. All of that stuff bends very unpredictably when you have n-gons. 4-sided faces bend, move, and change shape very nicely. Does that make sense? So there's not only the does it look right aspect of modeling, but there's also, did we build mathematically sound geometry that will deform well, light well, render well? Does that make sense? It goes beyond what does it look like. These are important aspects when you are creating art that is part of a production versus art you make for yourself. Does that make sense? Okay, so we're trying to avoid these n-gons. They are very, very bad. Now, you might be wondering, okay, well, how do I find these n-gons? What am I going to do? Obviously, they're terrible. Well, the good news is there's actually a tool. It's called the cleanup tool that will help you find and fix problem geometry. So it's not all on you. You do have a buddy to help you out. So be aware that's the case. But we'll talk about that one next lecture. Okay, but for now, realize that you are not in this boat alone. Maya will help you find it so that you can fix it. All right. Another periwinkle vocabulary, edge looping and topology. So again, anytime you see something in that periwinkle color, you know what that means is that's something that we expect you to know the definition of, how it works, and of course, that's something that we're grading on. So edge looping and topology is basically talking about how the edges flow across the surface of the geometry to create efficient shape and form change. And edge flow we talked about last class when we talked about moving the vertices to change the edge flow of the geometry. Well, that actually comes into play when you're modeling in terms of the quality of the model. Now, how can I tell if I have good edge looping and topology or if I have not so good edge looping and topology? Well, here are two markers, and one of them has good edge looping and topology, and one of them has not as good edge looping and topology. What do you guys think? Which one is the good one? The top one, right? So if you look at it, it's very neat and even, it's very organized, it's very efficient, there's a lot of good shape change going on there. It looks like it was done by somebody who knows what they're doing. Make sense? If I look at the edge looping for this model, it's very erratic. There's a lot of overlapping areas of edge looping here. You can see I'm getting some shading here from Maya, which is Maya's way of saying, hey, that's not cool. That's going to cause lighting issues because Maya is always trying to figure out how that surface is lit and how the light behaves on the surface of that object. So again, when you look at the edge looping and topology of a model, it's fairly easy to see what's neat, clean, and efficient, and what is messy and somewhat erratic. Does that make sense? Get a hell yeah on that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. So edge looping is something I want you to be aware of. Okay. Now, here's where we're going to delve into, again, what I call the big three tools. And what these guys are going to do is give us the skills that we need in order to be able to model anything we want. So once we can do these three, we can make anything. So let's delve into the multi-cut tool, the insert edge loop tool, and the extrude tool. So I'm going to demonstrate those things for you guys so that you can see how they work. And then we will do some activities together so that you can show me how they work. All right. So the first tool we're going to take a look at is the multi-cut tool. And the multi-cut tool is basically kind of like an X-Acto knife, because what it does is it allows you to cut the geometry, the surface of the geometry, and create components and edges and vertices and so forth. So in terms of where that tool lives, if you go to Edit Mesh, Mesh Tools, you will see the multi-cut tool. And as always, you can see the little icon here that represents it, so that if you wanted to press one of the buttons up here to find it, it's over here. And of course, way to the right, we have the options box, which is very important because many tools have options in terms of their functionality. So you need to know where that is and what that does. If you click on it, it allows you to access the options for that tool to alter its behavior. But let's take a look at the multi-cut tool. Let's say, for example, I want to build a cute little house so that you guys can all come visit me in the summertime when it's warm, right? And it's not a fancy house, it's a pretty simple one. But let's say that this is what I'm trying to build, right? Now, when I drew this house, what did I start with to draw it? A cube, right? So again, if that's the way I draw it, that's the way I model it. So if I'm going to model it, I'm going to start with a cube. Can I make that house with this cube? If I stretch it out, all right, let's take a look. All right, if I grab that face on top, know, I can make an A-frame house, right? Which is great if you live in Vermont, right? Don't want to have a flat roofed house though. Those always leak. All right. I can alter my roof a little bit, get, you know, a little California style condo, you know, let all the water run off that way. But does it look like this? So obviously what I need are more components. Does that make sense? Anytime you can't hit the shape and form you're looking for, you need more components. Well, great. Multi-cut tool is one of those tools that helps add components. So here's what I'm going to do. All right. I'm going to add the components, again, by using this multi-cut tool. So the way I do that is I go to my mesh tools and I select multi-cut. And you'll notice that I've got this thing in my hand now that looks kind of like an X-Acto knife. And when I go near corners, these like lasers come out. Right? Seems like it's driven to go there. And I can, if I go to an edge, the edge lights up. And that's because the multi-cut tool works on edges. That's what it's designed to do. So what I'll do is I'll come to an edge and I will click and hold with the left mouse button. And what that does is it gives me this cute little blue dot. And as long as I hold down my left mouse button, I can drag that dot along the edge. It won't go around corners, but it will travel back and forth through here. Now you'll notice that there's a little yellow number running alongside with that blue dot, and that is talking about the percentage along the edge that you are on. One side being 100, the other side being 0. So 50 is somewhere in the middle. Now, if I want to divide this cube right in half down the middle, it's kind of tough to hit it right on the 50 mark. But if I hold Shift down on my keyboard, all of a sudden, I'm moving at 10% increments. Does that make sense? So it's a little bit easier for me to find the 50% mark. And then all I have to do is let go. Now, this right here ultimately will be a vertice. It's a baby vertice waiting to be born. Oh, it's so cute. So again, it's not solid yet, but it will be. So then I can go wherever else I want to on this cube, and I can just keep clicking and keep dragging, and I can make any kind of shape or configuration I want. All right. Now, if you happen to create a shape you didn't want, if you use your delete key, you can actually go back a step. It's kind of like undo, and it'll allow you to go backwards so that you can remove something you didn't want. So again, if I want to make that house, what I'm going to end up having to do is come over here, and I'm going to click with my left mouse button, and as long as I hold it down, I can move it. And if I hold Shift, I get those little 10% increments, so I can make sure I got it right in the middle and let go. Now, once I've got the edge where I want it, that's when I hit Enter or click with the right mouse button, either or. And what that does is it literally cuts that edge in there. It wasn't in there before, but now it is. So I can select that edge and then go to my Move tool and move that edge. And now I've got that house that I've always wanted for you guys to come visit me in the summer. Now, very important, notice, when it came to cutting this thing, dropping it in, I put my edges in there, and I had to put down my multi-cut tool. And this is very important. If you look, you can see I still have my multi-cut tool in my hand. If I just keep clicking, it's gonna, I think I'm selecting, I'm not. I'm using my multi-cut tool to continue to cut this geometry. Does that make sense? So it's very important that I realize when I am done with what I want to do, I'm going to actually get out of this tool. I'm going to switch to my Select tool, or I'm going to switch to my Move tool or something like that, so that now I can select and then move whatever it is I'm trying to create. Does that make sense? Because what happens is a lot of times you don't know it, but you've got a tool in your hand and you're doing damage to your geometry because you don't realize you think you're selecting, but you're actually damaging the geometry. The story I like to tell is, imagine that you're on a construction site, right? and you're drilling holes in a piece of plywood. The foreman comes over to you and says, hey, can you sign this check for me? Oh yeah, no worries, I got it. Ah! I should have put down the drill tool and picked up the pen tool. Does that make sense? Make sure you're aware of what's in your hand, because you think you're selecting and you're actually using a tool on it. So keep an eye out for that. All right. Now, you guys ready for a little activity? Oh, actually, I got to show you the other two, then we'll do the activity. 2 more tools, then the activity. I apologize. I know you guys are excited. Here, we'll get rid of that house, and we're going to make another one just like it. No way! Yep, it's true. All right, so here's our house. Same objective. I want to create this house here, right? And I'm going to use a different tool to do it. This time I'm going to use the Insert Edge Loop tool. Now, in terms of the Insert Edge Loop tool, it's also under Mesh Tools. In fact, it's just a few above the Multi-Cut. And the Insert Edge Loop tool also works on edges. The difference between Multi-Cut and Insert Edge Loop is you click on an edge and hold it, and it gives you this dotted green line. And as long as you hold that left mouse button down, you can move that edge loop anywhere you want to. When you get it where you want it, again, this one won't go around corners either. But as soon as you get it where you want it, you can let go, and it cuts this edge loop through the entire model, right? Now, how many edges do I have selected right now? Do you guys see? 1, 2, 3, 4. Does that make sense? So if I go to my move tool and move it right now, did I create the house I wanted? No, not quite. So be aware how many edges you have selected, because when you first use that Insert Edge Loop tool, it's like a lightsaber through metal. Just it's still glowing all around. So what I have to do is click off into space, select just the one edge that I want to move, and then move that one. All right? So that's the same house, pretty fast, right? Now, what's the difference, if there is any, between that first house and that second house? Let's take.
Polygons?
What's the difference? Aha! If you look at those 2 houses, how many sides on this face? How many sides on that one? How many sides on that one? 5. So what's this one? N-gon, right? So this is the exact same shape, but this one is good math. This one less so. Does that make sense? All right, now, you might be looking at that and going, well, okay, so what do? I don't ever use the Multi-Cut tool, I guess. No, not at all. Actually, fixing N-gons is what the Multi-Cut tool is great at. That's its best job, really. So if I want to fix this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my Multi-Cut tool out again, and I'm going to fix this one so it looks like that one, right? Mesh Tools, Multi-Cut. And what I'm going to do is click on an edge, and I'm going to hold the left mouse button. I'm going to drag it all the way up. And you'll see it kind of gets stuck, because remember I told you it won't go around corners. So it'll get stuck up there at the top. And then I can come down here to the bottom, click. Again, hold shift to get to that 50% mark. All right. How many sides here?
4.
Here? All right. Woohoo! How many sides here?
5.
Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh no! There's a 5th one, right? But again, good news. Multi-Cut tool can fix it. Click, drag, and you know I'm going to have to fix this one on the back too. So now, if you look at these 2, They're identical. Does that make sense? So it is possible to model fully quadded geometry using the multi-cut tool. But which one was faster? Insert edge loop tool was way faster. And the insert edge loop tool is one of those tools that I call a safe tool to use, because if your geometry is quadded to begin with, it remains quadded. It will not unquad your geometry. So that's what's nice about the insert edge loop tool, because you really can't make bad geometry using it. So for example, if I've got this tool, this cube here, and I use my insert edge loop tool, I could drop an edge in and scale it out. I could drop another edge in, scale it in, drop another edge in, scale it out. And I don't have to worry, no matter what I do to that thing, I know all the faces are four-sided because the insert edge loop tool will not create n-gons. Does that make sense? That's why I call it a safe tool to use. Now, in terms of the multi-cut, does that mean the multi-cut is useless? No, that's ideal for fixing n-gons. That's the one you go in there and do the work when you've got to cut edges in because something's got 3 sides or something's got 5 sides or 487 sides. That's what you're going to want to use it for. Does that make sense? So they just have different kinds of jobs. They're both useful tools. All right. Let's take a look at the Mac Daddy of them all, the extrude tool. Now, in terms of the extrude tool, this is pretty much the modeling tool in Maya. When you are modeling in Maya, you pretty much have to use the extrude tool. It is what I refer to as an additive modeling tool, because it's basically, it works kind of like clay, where you sort of build off of what you already have. So if I'm modeling a person, I model my torso with clay, and then I take some more clay and I stick it on there, and then I can make an arm out of that or that kind of thing. The extrude tool is kind of like that, except that you don't have to get material and stick it on. What's great about the extrude tool is it literally creates more material, like magically, out of what you already have. So it's pretty cool in terms of its behavior. Now, the extrude tool works on a number of different levels in terms of components. If you want to, you can extrude vertices. If you just select one and you go to Edit Mesh and choose Extrude, you can actually extrude vertices and create, you know, all kinds of abominations of geometry. Rah! But I have to show you this one because this one's pretty cool. If you select all the vertices on a cube and do an extrusion, it'll do that. And then if you do a subsequent series of extrusions, it'll do that. Yep. And that's how you model dendrites. But other than this demonstration, I never extrude vertices. So, but you can do it. It is possible. Can you extrude edges? Absolutely. If you select an edge and you go to Edit Mesh and you choose Extrude, you can extrude an edge. And what you end up with when you extrude an edge is a single face, a single plane of geometry. And it's like razor thin. There's absolutely zero thickness to it. And in terms of polygon geometry, unless you're modeling a sheet of paper, you're probably not going to have anything that's only one face thick anyway. Not to mention that this is a geometry no we'll talk about later on, non-manifold geometry. But you can extrude an edge and create a whole face. You can even have two of them selected and do an extrusion and extrude them simultaneously. But 99.9% of the time, if not more, when you're extruding, you're going to be extruding faces. So what you'll do is select a face, Edit Mesh, Extrude, and you create new geometry from the geometry you already had. And then you can change the shape of that geometry and manipulate it to get a slightly different shape. And then you can do more extrusions and create more geometry. And you can make extrusions inside of extrusions and pull them up. You can do extrusions inside of extrusions and then make an extrusion and take it inward. Extrusions don't have to just go out, so you can make those as well. So what you find out is that you can make some pretty interesting shapes really fast using the extrude tool, and that's the power of that extrude tool. And it's one of those tools that I call a repeating tool, in that you can do several extrusions in a row and you don't even have to do anything, you know, keep going up to go get the tool, because some tools in Maya are repeatable and they repeat with the G key. G as in George. So if you did something and you want to do it again, if it's a repeatable tool, if you hit G, it will do it again. So you could do a rapid succession of extrusions and build something very, very quickly. Yes? How did I who? Oh, I extruded the vertices to get that. Yeah, it is fun to play with. I'll give you that. You don't typically model like that, but it is kind of neat. But yeah, I'll show you how to do that again. All right. Does that make sense in terms of what the extrude tool can do? Okay, so let's take a look at how it actually works. In terms of the extrude tool, what you'll do is select the face or faces that you want to extrude, and then you go to Edit Mesh and you choose Extrude. All right. Now what you'll notice is that this manipulator shows up, right? Do you guys recognize any other tools when you look at that? Do you see anything you recognize from another tool? What do you see? You see the arrows of the move tool, right? You see those. What else is in there? The circle, right? That big outer ring. It looks like the rotate tool. What else do you see in there? The cubes from scale, right? That's because the extrude tool is kind of like the Swiss Army knife of tools. It does what all of those tools built in one. So you don't have to keep switching to those. Yes? Oh, we're going to talk about that, but that reorients. It's not power. It looks like a power button, but that reorients your extrusion from object space to world space. So in terms of the different aspects of this tool, if you watch, I can scale using the cube, right? Scale in, scale in. I can then grab the arrows, and you'll notice I was touching the cubes only when I was doing the scale aspect of that. I can also grab the arrows and pull them, and that gives you that move capacity. I could also click on that outer ring, which gives me the rotate capacity, and I can rotate that face, right? Move, and then when I want to sort of pull something out, I have to do an additional extrusion. Edit Mesh, Extrude, pull it out. And again, we talked about the fact that I can scale by using this axis and then this axis, but that doesn't mean that they move the same amount, right? What did we talk about that we could do to make things move the same amount on both axes? We did that with the vertices. We can do, well, it is selected, but do you remember the trick where I had you hold Control and manipulate this axis, and it will move on this one and this one the same amount to maintain that perfect spacing? Again, that's a handy little trick. And I can do extrusions where I'm just sort of creating a face inside of a face, because if you look at this, you can see that this is perfectly flat. And I can go to Edit Mesh, Extrude, again, hold Control and manipulate the axis on the top. And I haven't gone up or down. This face is still very flat. But what I've done is created a smaller face inside of a larger one, which I can do an additional extrusion from and have a change of direction like that. Or I can do another extrusion, hold Control, make a smaller face inside of a larger one, and then do another extrusion and pull it down into the object. Make sense? So there's all kinds of fun stuff that I can do with that tool to create changes in shape. All right. So now I'll give you that slide back. Sorry about the tease. Now we're going to do the big 3 tools. Brian and I are going to walk around and see you and make sure that you can do these things. And what I want you to do is open up. We have an exercise in here called the big 3 activity. So please select that one and open it. No need to save this. And what you'll see is we've got a scene with 3 cute little houses in it. The first house is made with the multi-cut tool. The second house is made with the insert edge loop tool. And the third house is made of bricks. No, I'm just kidding. The third house is with the extrude tool. So in terms of your houses, I want you to recreate these 3 houses. And you might have noticed that, hey, wait, I can see how come it's shaded and I can see the edges? What's going on there? What I did was under my shading menu, same place as I go for X-ray, we also have something called wireframe on shaded. And what that does is it allows you to see your geometry shaded in 5 mode, but you can also still see the edges. And that comes in really handy with some other tools I'm going to show you later on. Now, these tools have been made bulletproof, or these houses have been made bulletproof. I put them on a layer and made it so that you can't mess with them, so that you can use them as a reference and you don't have to worry about breaking them or deleting them or whatever. So this is what you guys will do. First, you're going to create 3 cubes. So make 1, 2, 3. So now I've got my 3 cubes, and I want these cubes to look like the houses behind. So for the first house, you will use the multi-cut tool. And again, all you have to do is find that 50% mark by holding Shift. Cut that edge in there. Select that edge. And then move that edge. Then I'm going to go to my second house, and I'm going to use my Insert Edge Loop tool. Drag it into place. Let go. Select just the edge on top and move that. And then you'll go to your last house, and this is the one that I want you to create sort of this Pizza Hut looking roof. And that's going to be with the Extrude tool, which is under Edit Mesh. Extrude. And what we're going to do is holding Control, manipulate the Z axis, which will bring it in on Y and X simultaneously. And then you just pull it up into place. And that will give you your 3 houses. All right, so again, Brian and I are going to walk around and just make sure you guys can do that, because these are skills you're going to need to model, obviously. So we want to make sure you can do this. Why are we always next to a music class, Brian?
I know.
You notice? Which I wouldn't mind if they did like requests, you know. Oh, good, good. Yeah.
It's like, I'll be good.
Jar. Oh, okay. Yeah, I was
Mhm.
wondering. It's like that mouse right there.
Quicker fashion, or is that?
What is the batteries of that? Where it makes like AA, not me too.
No, you do have to extrude that just to get that lip of the metal around there. Yeah.
Have them ready if I have them.
Yeah. Make sure you select the face. How you guys doing? Okay. Okay. Oh, if you just go to your shading menu set and choose wireframe on shaded, you'll see it. There you go. Good, good. There There you go. Make sure you grab the edge. Yep, you could grab the vertices or the edge, either or, but it'd be easier to grab just the one edge. Okay, well, let me see you do it.
Some of them, it won't let me do anything at all.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's do this. First, select that object and delete it. Let's make a brand new cube. So use Q to get to your selection tool. All right, go to the right mouse button and choose object mode. It's okay. Object mode. Select it and delete it. All right, make a brand new cube. Now, your multi-cut tool is where? Yep, mesh tools, multi-cut. All right. Now you have to go to the edge you want to cut, and with the left mouse button, click on it.
Doesn't seem like there's something up there.
There you go. All right, and it looks like you got some kind of symmetry thing on.
Yeah, I don't know why it does that. And it won't let me do it like that.
Let's do this. Go to Maya, the word Maya, preferences, and let's just try resetting back to default. Upper left-hand corner, edit, restore default, save. All right.
Still does it.
Let me see where you've turned that on, because you definitely have it turned on somewhere.
Touch it.
Well, there's a lot of keys built into Maya called hotkeys, and you accidentally hit one, and that's why that's doing that.
Yes.
Let's do, I'll scooch over a second. Let me look real quick and see. I don't have a ton of time or we're going to get in trouble, but if you got your symmetry turned on. There you go. That should be it. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, what?
No, that's all right.
After the multi-cut tool, I don't know why it's.
All right, right mouse button click to get out of the tool.
It doesn't seem to be latching on or.
You know what though? I think you are working with a NURBS surface and not a polygon, and that's the problem. Go to object mode and delete that. Yep. I think you're working with a NURBS object. Keep selecting those pieces and deleting them. Yep, delete. In object mode though. It's got to be lit green. There you go. Yep. Object. There you go. Oops. Yeah, just hit delete. Yep, delete. Now, choose your polygon shelf tab. The tab across the top that says polygon modeling. And select a cube from there. That's a polygon. I think you'll find that tool works a lot better on those. Different pieces of geometry, different types of geometry you use different tools on. It would be the same as if you used tools for glass cutting on wood. It just wouldn't work as well. Does that make sense? You want to match the tool to the material you're working with. Good, good. How are you guys doing? Good? Yep. Well, you have to select it first. So go to edge mode. No. You don't want that tool. You just want to use your hands working with it. You've created the component. Remember, I was saying you got to put that tool down and then actually physically grab stuff and move it. So go to edge mode. No, hit. It's okay. Let's put the tool down. Now, edge mode. Right mouse button. Choose edge. It's up at the top. Keep going up. Keep going up. There you go. Now select the edge with the left mouse button. No, the one in the middle. That one. Click with the left mouse button. Now using your move tool, move it.
I got you.
Yep. Yep. That's why we do these activities. Until you put your hands on it and actually do it, it's hard to figure out what's going on. How are these guys doing? You check them out?
Yes.
They're good? Okay, cool. Sure.
Is there like a meeting thing we have to go to today?
No. You guys are fine. There is a meeting going on during your lab, but it doesn't affect you any. You'll be here anyway. Just letting you know that we will be going to a meeting and some other instructors will be in here to help you. Yeah, this class, the lecture still goes from 9 to 11 and your lab still goes from 1 to 7. That doesn't change.
That was today?
Yeah.
This class?
Yeah, 9 to 11, and then you have lab from 1 to 7. Here. Have you not gone to lab previous? We have lab. Every day you have lecture, you have lab.
So let's create a new cube and we'll put it over here.
Confused because it's not on the schedule.
Uh-huh. Yeah, no, if you're in section 1, so set your lab for section 1, it tells you where you're supposed to be, and it's here at 1. All right. Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Am I just like copying this?
No. No, you're using the multi-cut tool, the insert edge loop tool, and the extrude tool. Those are the houses that I made. You're supposed to be making your own houses that look just like them.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I just
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. Were you watching anything I was doing?
Yeah, I'm still confused.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's take a quick look at your notes and we'll figure out what we're missing.
I don't have any notes.
Okay. Well, that's why you're confused. Do you remember me saying at the beginning of the class, this is a class you're going to have to write stuff down? Are you starting to see that? Okay. So here's the thing. Moving forward, you're going to have to write stuff down. There is way too much to remember. You are not going to be able to sort of follow along and keep up. That's not going to happen. And it's got nothing to do with how smart you are or how artistically talented you are. It's got nothing to do with any of those things. There is a lot of material. It's highly technical and you can't wing it. You know what I mean? This is not a wing it line of work. So do you have a notebook today? Okay, so what I would say is get your notebook out, get a pen, and start writing stuff down because you're going to need to understand what's going on, and you need to have your notes because that's what you're going to refer to every time you get lost. Does that make sense? Your notes are kind of like the instructions, your guidebook, you know? So you're going to have to keep going back and forth to those. Now, as far as today's lecture is going, take notes moving forward from here, but you're going to have to watch the whole first half of the lecture and take notes to the video. Does that make sense? So luckily we do record these lectures so you can see it and hear it again, but you're definitely going to need to start writing stuff down or you are going to fall behind faster and faster. And unfortunately, that's just the way it goes. Does that make sense? So, and to be honest with you, If we can figure that out, lecture 3, awesome. That's a win because you can come back from that. Does that make sense? So just realize, okay, this is the way we have to approach it from now on, because we're just going to be learning way too much to try to memorize it all. And to be honest with you, you don't want to try to memorize it all. You want to have that stuff in your notebook, because if you're just listening to me, you're renting the information. If you write it down, you own the information. Does that make sense? And you want to own it. You don't want to rent it. Does that make sense? So you didn't do anything wrong, but we learned a very valuable lesson today. Okay? So get a notebook out, ask me questions. If you need me to say something again or slower, I'm totally fine with that. Okay? Yep, that's all you were supposed to do. You're good. Yes. Oh, okay. Well, yeah, we're not doing that yet, but we'll get there. I'm glad you're going ahead, though. That's very smart. Watch the videos in advance. It's excellent advice. Yes. If you hold control and manipulate Z, it will move in on X and Y, but you have to hold down that control key or it won't work. All right, so it seems like you guys are doing pretty well with this. Not too bad, not too bad. And just remember, these are all activities for you to practice. So if you feel like this particular activity didn't go as well as you would like it to, practice it. You know, don't save it. Bring this thing home, work on it again at home, work on it again in lab. Bring it to the Google Hangout and work on it there with an instructor watching so that you can make sure you're getting this stuff down. And, you know, like I was mentioning to one of your classmates, we record these lectures so that you can watch them again and again. But even if you're watching the video lecture, I recommend very highly you write stuff down, because it's very hard to scrub through 2 hours of information to find the one little piece of information you want. That's horrible. So, but if you write it down, you've got it right there. It's sort of like the Cliff Notes, the shorter version of what it is we talked about today. So I recommend that very highly. Review that stuff. And if at all possible, if you can watch the lecture before we have it, that really works well. I found that to be one of the most successful tools we have. So please utilize that stuff, because it's going to make a difference for you, I promise. And I know it's difficult because the classes you've had in the past have not pushed you like this.
Yes.
But you know what? This is what you want to do for a living. So you got to learn how to do this. And it's not easy. This is not English comp. This is not advanced underwater harmonica. This is the real deal. You're trying to get into a field that is highly competitive and extremely technical. So yeah, it's going to be different, but that's not a bad thing. We adjust. All right. So again, in terms of the extrude tool, as I mentioned, it's a very powerful tool. It is the modeling tool in Maya. So we really have to learn how to use it. So as a result, I've actually put together another set of activities for you guys to do that I think will help out tremendously with your understanding of the extrude tool. So if you go, we're going to go back to our activity file folder, and this time we're going to open up our, we want the, manipulate component and extrude activity. It's got the longest name. And the reason I made this activity is because typically what happens with students when I first show them how to do this stuff, you know, first we moved components to change the shape. We're like, yay, we get that. And then we did the extrude tool, and they're like, ooh, I really like the extrude tool. So then, unfortunately, the connection is typically students will believe, oh, the extrude tool is the answer to everything. So you're like, oh, I need to change the shape of this object, extrude tool. I got to pay my bills this month, extrude tool. I'm really hungry, extrude tool. And the reality is the extrude tool doesn't do everything. Sometimes you just need to move the components you already have. And this is a very key aspect of modeling that you need to understand. We are trying to model from the standpoint of efficiency. And you have to think of vertices like money. So when you're building an object, you're trying to build that object with fewer vertices if at all possible. You don't want to just have tons and tons of vertices on something because you're just blowing your money. So in terms of that efficiency of the modeling, you want to make sure you're starting light and working to more detail rather than the other way around, because it's actually easier to change the shape of an object when there are fewer components involved. So there's a speed to the process when you start light and then revisit in a series of passes. We'll talk about that as we go. But so anyway, I put together this exercise for you guys to help you see, do I need the extrude tool or do I just need to move components? Because that's the battle that we need to win. Now, you'll notice that in this scene, I've got a bunch of yellow objects and a bunch of green ones. And the yellow objects are the goal or the objective. This is what I want to create. And in terms of how do I get there, you have to use the green or the darker object to its right. So if I look at this object, I see, okay, this is my goal, and this is what I have to work with. Does that make sense? So you might look at that and go, okay, I'm trying to make it curved. It's a block. Extrude tool. But again, that's not the answer in this instance. I don't need the extrude tool to make this more curved. I need to use the components I already have. Because if I select the edge on the corner here and I move it, and I'll do this in my top view so you can see it happening. If I take that edge and move it in and move it in, ooh, I'm starting to get curvature. I'm getting a change of shape. So I'm going to grab this edge and this edge. Again, it's a corner. And then I come over here and I move it in and I move it in. You can see I'm starting to get curvature. Does that make sense? So it's not the extrude tool. It's me properly positioning the components that I've already paid for in order to get that curvature. Move them into place until I get the shape I want. Now, if you look at the one that was created by Maya, you can see, you know, I hate to use the word perfect, but you can see it's pretty perfect. Mine, not so much, because I'm doing mine by eye, so there's bound to be irregularity to it. So in terms of making that adjustment, I'm going to make that adjustment again, but this time I'm going to make it less irregular by utilizing a really fun trick that we've already learned how to do. Can you guys imagine what the trick is? Control with the scale tool, right? That trick we did with the vertices, we're going to do it with the edges also. Now, what I did was I just selected the 4 corners of this cube, right? Get my scale tool out. And again, I could eyeball it and bring them in and bring them in. But again, I'm not quite as rounded as that. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to hold down the control key and manipulate Y only. And that way it will come in on X and Z the same amount. And you can see, oh yeah, I can nail that shape. Does that make sense? So I'm just using the components I already have and some neat little tricks I've already learned to hit that shape. So that's the first one. So then we come to the second one. Okay, this is the goal. I need this shape, whatever the heck it is, and this is what I have to work with. Well, how do I make this look like that? Is it just moving components this time? What do you guys think? Is it components or extrude? Well, we'll put it to a vote. How many of you guys think it's move the components? Okay, how many of you think it's extrusion? All right, so don't be shy. You can say extrusion. Thank you. All right, so let's do an extrusion. Now, in terms of doing the extrusion, if I grab one face and I do my extrusion, edit mesh, extrude, I get just that square going up. But that's not what I want. What I want is a square in the middle, a bigger one in the middle. So what I'm going to do is select all the faces on top here. And with them all selected, I just have to hold shift to add to my selection. With all of them selected, I'm going to go to edit mesh, extrude. Now if I pull it straight up, no, that's not what I wanted. What I pull up needs to be smaller. So this is too big. So I'm not going to do that. Oh, I know. I'll make a smaller face inside of a larger one because I've done that before. So again, I want it to come in on 2 axes to make a smaller face on top of a larger one. Again, it doesn't go in or out, it just makes a smaller one on top. But I want it to come in evenly. So what's the trick for that? I heard somebody say it, I'm gonna hold control and manipulate the blue axis, and then that way it will come in evenly on X and Y at the same time, and it will create a smaller face inside of this larger one. Now, if I just pull it straight up, now we're back to our Pizza Hut roof. But again, that's not what I want. I want a nice sharp transition here. So I'm not gonna pull it up yet. What I'm gonna do is an additional extrusion. Edit mesh, extrude. Now I pull it up. Oh, that's what I wanted. Does that make sense? Okay. So then we look at our next one, right? This one, oh no, a cylinder coming out of a cube. The worst and most dangerous of shapes. Now, this one is actually a combination of this one and that one. Does that make sense? So for this one, again, I'm going to grab the faces on top, holding shift, grab everybody. Edit mesh, extrude. Holding control, manipulate the Z axis to give me a smaller face inside of a larger one. Again, it doesn't go up or down yet. I'm going to do an additional extrusion and pull it up. But wait, it's not round. But we know how to grab the corners of something. And again, using my scale tool, hold control, manipulate the axis on top, and it will move in on the other two. And that makes it round. Does that make sense? Okay, now here's one to think about. All right, I want to accomplish the same thing. So this time, I'm going to do it differently though. Edit mesh, extrude. I'm going to make a smaller face inside of a larger one by holding control and manipulating the Z axis. But the cool thing about the extrude tool is whatever shape you select when you do an extrusion, that's the shape you get, right? Works kind of like Play-Doh. So what I'm going to do is, this is square, but what I want is a cylinder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually grab these vertices here, scale them towards each other in the middle. So I've already got a round shape. So now when I grab this thing and I do my extrusion, I've already got a cylinder because the extrude tool pulls out the shape that the faces are in to begin with. So, you know, can make it a circle first and then extrude, or extrude it and then make it rounded. It doesn't make any difference. They both arrive at the same thing, just a different thought process, right? For this one, again, it's already a cylinder and it's going into a cylinder, so not much of a change there. Grab the face on top, edit mesh, extrude, holding control, manipulate Z to make the smaller face on top. Again, don't pull it up too soon because I need it to be flat on the top. So I must need another extrusion. Pull it up to get that one. And then the very last one, uh-oh, this one goes inward. That's the devil. Nope, not so bad. Again, select the face on top, edit mesh, extrude. You might have seen me go to this button right here. That's the quick button for extrude. Edit mesh, extrude. Make a smaller face inside of a larger one. Oh, actually, let me show you this. If I did the extrusion and just went straight down, like let's just say I extruded and I tried to go in too soon, you can see, oh boy, see that crazy moire pattern there, that zigzagging? That's Maya's cute little way of saying what you've done is boo-how, don't do that, right? And it doesn't have the thickness that this has, so obviously extrude straight down was not my solution. So what I'm going to do is I want that thickness, so I'm going to make a smaller face inside of a larger one, just like I did before. And again, I don't want to push down right away, because I mean, if you want to make a steel drum, that's perfect. But if you're trying to make it seem like a jar or a cup or something, hint, hint, I'm going to have to do an extrusion, a second one, edit mesh extrude, and drag it down so that I've got that. So that gives me the thing that I was looking for. So with this manipulate component and extrude exercise, you can make some very interesting details which can be applied to other things that you're going to build, like jars, beer bottles, and things like that. So if you can do these activities, you're going to be able to have a huge head start on the modeling you're going to have to do to create the objects for your week 1 competency, which are going to require moves, skills, and tools that we just did. Just more of them. That's the way it works. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, here's the very important thing for you to understand about modeling. I've shown you some tools, and I've shown you how these tools work. Okay, and you can use them with some ability at this point. You're going to need to practice to get better. But realize that all I've done is given you the tools. The art will come from practice. Does that make sense? I didn't give you this is how you make a teapot. No, you have to learn that. The parallel that I like to draw in terms of explaining it is if I give you a chunk of marble, a chisel, and a hammer, and I tell you if you hit the hammer right on the end of your chisel, you're going to get this kind of mark. If you angle it, you get that kind of mark. If you hold it upwards and little taps, you get this kind of mark. Now go make a statue. Does that make sense? You know kind of how the tool works, but that doesn't mean you can create statues. You're going to have to explore. You're going to have to work at it. You're going to have to work that tool. You're going to have to make mistakes. You're going to have to start again. But eventually you'll get the feel of how that works, and then you can create art with it. Does that make sense? Because this is art. I mean, we're using a computer and we're using a mouse, which is like about as far from art as you can imagine most of the time. But the reality of the situation is there is a touch and there is a finesse to creating artwork using these very simple tools. And, you know, have you guys ever seen like an ice sculpture, a beautiful ice sculpture, if you go to a nice dinner someplace? They're using chainsaws and blowtorches to make that stuff, right? But it's beautiful, the carvings that they can create. It took time to learn how to use a blowtorch and a chainsaw to turn ice into a beautiful sculpture. So this is the same kind of idea. You're going to have to put time in on this, a lot of time. You're going to have to make mistakes. You're going to have to start over. You're going to have some catastrophes. That's okay. Everybody learns at a different rate of speed, and everybody learns at a different number of mistakes to arrive at success. So realize that if it's going to take you 20 tries to get it, start sooner so that you can get your 20 tries out of the way, and then now you're creating art. I don't know, have you guys ever had an art class before, like a really intense one? Any instructors ever tell you you've got 1,000 bad drawings in you? You've heard that? Okay, and what they want you to do is draw a lot, make a lot of bad drawings to get those bad ones out so that you can start getting to the good ones. Modeling is no different. So you're going to make a lot of bad models up front. That's okay. That's part of the process. But you have to go through that process. There's no shortcut. I would just give it to you if there was one. You know, if there's like a button, hey, look, guys, nobody will tell you this, but if you press this button, you get dragon. Yeah, there is no shortcut. This is art, and you've got to put in the time to learn to do it. Does that make sense? Okay. It's going to be frustrating. It's going to happen because you're used to seeing yourself at a certain level as an artist. And this is going to be like stick figures, and you're going to be really frustrated and angry a lot. And I get that because I come from a traditional art background too. But I can assure you, if you practice and you work and you are tenacious, and that is the key, eventually your 3D skills will match up with your 2D skills. And then you'll be really excited, and you can create anything with those 3 tools. Does that make sense? Okay. So put in the time and realize it is going to take work, and that's why these jobs are not for everybody. It is. What's that? All right. No worries. Let me get to the skill check. Boop. All right. Now, skill check for this lecture 3 skill check. What you're going to have to do is build the jar. Now you remember we did the jar once already, right? But that was a block out or a primitive build. We just took shapes and stuck them together just so we could learn to use the tools, use image planes and fun stuff like that. Now we're actually using modeling tools. This is how we model something. Does that make sense? So I'm going to set my project to my skill check file folder, and I'm going to show you how to model the jar just so you can see the thought processes behind it. All right. Now, first things first, I'm going to set my project to my skill check file folder. And thanks for the heads up on the time, Brian. I get lost sometimes. Okay, so then I go to my jar asset start file, the same one I started with before. Only this time, I'm going to model that bad boy. So again, in terms of the object itself, if I'm going to draw it, I start with a cylinder. So if I model it, I'm going to start with a cylinder. So I get my cylinder. I scale from the middle for all the reasons we scale from the middle. I'm going to put it on X-ray there so I can see it a little bit better. All right. Line it up. Okay. Line it up over here as well. Change it to X-ray so I can see through it. Now, in this instance, I need some more geometry, but I don't necessarily need to extrude. I can actually just move what I've already got. So what I'm going to do is go to vertex mode, marquee, select the vertices on top, and you can see right here what I've done. I just selected everybody on top, including the one in the middle, and then I can just move it up. Now, does anybody know why I stopped right there? Because of the lip, right? There's a change in shape. Remember we talked about the idea that wherever there's a change in shape, that means I got to have components there. So I'm going to need components there. And there's different ways of doing it. I could go past that shape if I want to, right? Just pull it all the way up to here. And I could put more components in, right? I can use my insert edge loop tool, and I can drop an edge right in here and drop an edge right in here. Now, why did I put 2? Because I need this edge as a holding edge so that when I scale this one out using my scale tool, it holds that shape. Does that make sense? Just use my insert edge loop tool. And then I'm going to grab the faces on top. I'm going to grab them from over here. Grab all my faces on top. You see what I have selected? And do another extrusion, right? Pull it up. And again, I want it to scale in all directions evenly, so I hold Control and manipulate the Z axis to make it go outward. All right. Now, I want to make that interior for the jar. And incidentally, the jar is ceramic, right? It's made of one material. So how many pieces will this thing be made of? 1, right? So again, I know this is going to be made of 1 piece of geometry. So I'm going to do my extrusion. And I'm going to make a little bit of a lip on there. And then I'm going to do another extrusion to make the interior. And the cool thing about X-ray is I can see how that interior is being made. And what I want to do is I want to angle the interior to match the exterior. Because if it's made of ceramic, it's a clay material, it's going to be the same thickness all the way throughout, right? It's not going to be thinner at the top and thicker at the bottom. So I'm going to scale that in so that that matches. And then again, I'm not going to just drag that straight down because you can see this thickness is not the same throughout. So I'll just bring it down to like right here where I got that change in shape. And I'll do another extrusion and bring that down. And again, I don't go all the way down. I want it to be the same thickness here as there. And that's a model jar because I'm using insert edge loop, I'm using multi-cut, I'm using extrude. I'm not just shoving shapes together. Does that make sense? All right. Now, do I have to build it that way? No, not at all. If I want to, I can start with this same thing. Take these vertices, bring them down here. Grab the faces on top. Do an extrusion. Pull it up. Holding control. Scale it out. Do another extrusion. Pull it up. Using the scale tool with control. Pull it in. Do another extrusion. Pull it up. Does anybody know what key I'm pressing to do things again and again? Control to scale evenly and G to repeat. Very good. All right. And again, another G to do another extrusion. Another G to bring it in. And you'll notice that this time I didn't use the insert edge loop tool at all, right? It was just extrusion the whole time. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. There are many ways to model something, and no one is ever going to ask you, which tool did you use? You're just going to wait and make sure that everything looks right when you're all done. And if you want to add some curvature to it, get your insert edge loop tool, drop in an edge, pull it up a little bit, give yourself a little bit of a lip there. I might want to drop an edge in here and drop an edge in here. And again, use my control with the scale. Bring that out a little bit. And you can see I can make it a lot more rounded, a lot nicer. Does that make sense? Doesn't matter what you're trying to make. It's the same couple of tools, but it's knowing how to use them. And that's why you've got to practice these activities. You've got to use them to get better, faster, smoother, and eventually you can make anything. Does that make sense? Okay, so your skill check for lecture 3 is model the jar. This is the way we're going to model for our week 1 competency, right? We're going to use the insert edge loop tool, the multi-cut tool, and the extrude tool. We're not shoving shapes together, we're modeling. So it's going to be harder. It's going to take longer at first. You will get the hang of it, but it's going to take time. You got to practice. All right. Now, well, but here's the thing. In time, you model that quickly. That's not even that fast. I got to be honest with you. I have to go slower so you guys can see what I'm doing. But the bottom line is, I've been working with Maya for 15 years. Is there anybody in this room who's worked with Maya for 15 years? Okay, so it's going to look easy when I do it. It's going to look fast when I do it. And I've got it way slowed down. But that's because I've done it so much. If you look at your lives, things that you know how to do, play the guitar, ride a bike, drive, all that stuff took time to learn to do. This is no different. Luckily, it's no different. If you practice, you will get better, but it's going to take some hard work, Any of you guys play instruments at all? Okay, cool. Was that easy? No, it was brutal, right? Very humbling at first, very frustrating, but when you're like, I'm going to learn how to do this if it kills me. That's what you have to do with this, How many of you have ever played a video game? Yeah, everybody's awake now. Now, the very first time you play a video game, are you great at it? No, you're not. You're terrible. You die a lot. So do you die one time and then put the game away? Oh, I hate this game. Sometimes. It depends on the graphics, right? But point being, when it comes to games, you don't hang up your hat the minute you're not doing great. You buckle down and you ignore the rest of reality and you play that thing until you beat it. This is a game you're playing. This is the same kind of thing. You have to beat this. Does that make sense? Okay, so stay focused. Don't get too frustrated. Take a break if you're getting angry, because you can't do this work when you're mad. Take a deep breath, then come back and try again. You will get it. It just takes time. Okay? All right. Thank you very much, everybody. That's all we need to talk about today. I will see you again on Friday. Yay. It'll be a lot of fun. We'll learn some more tools and some more techniques. So bring your A game and we'll talk then. Thank you very much. I'll see you later. See you, my digital friends. Get into the Google Hangout, get some help, get some feedback. That is the path to success. Thank you, Brian. I appreciate your help.